The dinner dishes were still warm. Annie had cooked. Tomasso had poured the wine. Nancy had sat at that table the way an 84-year-old woman sits at her daughter's table on a Thursday night. Unhurried, comfortable, belonging there completely. There was no argument, no tension, no moment that anyone at that table would have marked as significant. Just a mother and her daughter, and the kind of evening that families across this country have every single week without anyone taking note of it. At some point, the plates were cleared. At some point, the conversation wound down. At some point, Tomasso got his keys. The drive from their home to Nancy's took 15 minutes through the Tucson night. Nancy was in the passenger seat. She was warm. She was full. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. Tomasso pulled into her driveway. Nancy got out. She walked into her garage. The door came down behind her. Tomasso drove away. And at 10:10 p.m. on January 31st, Nancy Guthrie was alone. What happened in the next 19 minutes has never been fully told. Not by law enforcement, not by the journalists who have been on the ground in Tucson since February 1st, not by any channel covering this case, because everyone has been looking at what happened at 1:47 in the morning, the camera being disabled, the masked figure, the 41-minute window that Nancy's own pacemaker recorded with physiological precision that no human witness could match. But inside Nancy's chest, one thing never stopped recording. Not at 10:10, not at 10:15, not at 10:22. The pacemaker does not sleep. It does not wait for a crime to begin before it starts paying attention. It was logging every single heartbeat from the moment Tomasso's taillights disappeared down that street. The FBI has that data. Every beat, every timestamp, every minute of the last normal night of Nancy Guthrie's life recorded in the device that was keeping her alive. And what that data shows about those 19 minutes, what it tells us about when this crime actually began, who knew it was coming, and what the last normal heartbeat of an ordinary Thursday evening proves in a federal courtroom. That is what this video is about. My name is D, and this is Criminal Engineering. Stay with me all the way through, because the most important timestamp in this entire investigation is not 1:47 in the morning. It is 10:10 at night, and the 19 minutes that followed it are about to tell you everything. The garage door closed at 10:10 p.m. That sound, the mechanical grind and the final thud of it settling into the frame, was the last sound that connected Nancy Guthrie to the outside world that night. Tomasso was already pulling away. The street went quiet, and inside that house an 84-year-old woman who had just had dinner with her daughter began the small, private rituals of coming home. Nobody was watching. Nobody was listening. Nobody except the device sitting just beneath her left collarbone, running on a lithium battery, recording every single beat of her heart with the indifference of a machine that does not know the difference between an ordinary Thursday night and the last ordinary Thursday night of someone's life. The pacemaker was already working. It had been working since the day it was implanted. And at 10:10 p.m. on January 31st, it was logging something that forensic cardiologists call a post-exertion settling pattern. Not distress, not fear, not the sharp, sudden elevation that would come hours later. Just a heart doing exactly what a heart does after a mild evening of dinner and conversation and a 15-minute car ride through the Tucson night. Settling, slowing, returning to the rhythm of a woman who expects the rest of the night to be uneventful. That word matters more than it sounds. Uneventful. Because a pacemaker logging a settled, calm, post-dinner cardiac pattern at 10:10 p.m. is not just recording what Nancy felt. It is recording what Nancy knew, and what Nancy knew at 10:10 p.m. on January 31st was nothing. She did not know what was 4 hours away. Her heart said so. The device in her chest said so. And the FBI has the timestamp that proves it. Now think about what those first few minutes inside that house actually looked like. Nancy was 84 years old. She had lived in Tucson long enough to know every corner of that home the way you only know a place you have loved for years. She knew which light switch was closest to the garage door. She knew how many steps it took to reach the kitchen. She knew the particular quiet of her own house at night the way people who live alone come to know it, not as loneliness, but as familiarity. She had walked through that garage door hundreds of times. This time felt like all the others. That is the detail that matters, not the silence outside, not the darkness beyond her windows. The fact that to Nancy Guthrie at 10:10 p.m. on January 31st coming home felt exactly like coming home always felt. Safe. Familiar. Hers. Her pacemaker was recording a heart rate consistent with low-level physical activity in the first minutes after arrival. A woman moving through her home, setting something down, turning on a light, the small adjustments a person makes when they are transitioning from being somewhere else to being where they belong. The device logged all of it. Not because anything was wrong, because everything was right. And in a federal investigation, the last recorded moment that everything was right is not a footnote, it is evidence. By 10:15 p.m., the cardiac data would have begun showing the earliest indicators of a body moving toward rest. A gradual decline in heart rate. A settling of the accelerometer data as movement through the house slowed and then stopped. The pacemaker's internal logs distinguish between active movement and stillness, with a precision that most people do not realize these devices are capable of. When Nancy sat down, the device knew. When she stopped moving from room to room, the device knew. When her body began the long, slow descent toward sleep, the device was already recording it. At 10:15 p.m. on the last night anyone confirmed Nancy Guthrie was safe inside her own home. Her pacemaker was logging the physiological profile of a woman at rest, undisturbed, unafraid, completely unaware. Now here is the forensic principle that no other coverage of this case has stated clearly. A pacemaker logging pre-sleep relaxation at 10:15 p.m. is simultaneously logging the absence of threat inside that home at 10:15 p.m. Those two things are the same data point. That's because an 84-year-old woman who has an intruder inside her home does not have a pre-sleep relaxation cardiac profile. She has a fear response. She has the accelerated heart rate that a body generates when it understands, consciously or not, that something in its environment is wrong. The sharp uptick, the elevated baseline, the physiological language of a person whose nervous system has registered danger before their mind has fully processed it. The pacemaker recorded none of that between 10:10 and the hours that followed, which means the forensic record of Nancy's own body confirms what the investigation has never publicly stated with this level of precision. Nobody was inside that house when she walked in. The threat was not already waiting for her. The crime did not begin at 10:10 p.m., and that single forensic fact, logged in time-stamped cardiac data sitting in the FBI's possession right now, is more consequential for this investigation than almost anything else in the public record, because if the crime did not begin at 10:10 p.m., it began later. If it began later, it was planned to begin later. If it was planned to begin later, someone made that plan before Nancy ever walked through her garage door, and the question of who made that plan, and when they made it, and what they knew about Nancy's Thursday evening that made 1:47 in the morning the chosen moment, that question has an answer. The pacemaker is already pointing toward it. By 10:22 p.m., the cardiac data tells us Nancy's body had completed its transition toward sleep. Heart rate down. Movement stopped or nearly stopped. The accelerometer pattern consistent with a person who has settled into a chair or a bed and is not planning to move again until morning. An 84-year-old woman who had just had dinner with her daughter, been driven safely home by her son-in-law, and walked into the house she knew and loved, doing exactly what you would expect her to do. Exactly what anyone who knew her schedule, knew her routine, knew the rhythm of a Thursday evening at Annie and Tomasso's house and the 15-minute drive home afterward would have expected her to do. The 19-minute window closes here, not with violence, not with fear, with a heartbeat. Steady, calm, unremarkable. The last confirmed normal reading in the forensic record of Nancy Guthrie's life. And somewhere in Tucson, while that heartbeat was settling into sleep, something was already in motion. The backpack had not yet been packed. The camera had not yet been studied. The route had not yet been walked. But the decision had already been made. The pacemaker proves it, because the body of the woman those 19 minutes belonged to never registered a moment of fear from the time that garage door closed until the early hours of February 1st. Which means whoever came for her at 1:47 in the morning did not decide to come for her in the hours after she got home. They decided before Tomasso ever turned the car around. The 19-minute window does not just tell us what normal looked like. It tells us exactly when normal was already over for the people who were planning to end it. There is a question this investigation has never answered publicly. Not in any press conference, not in any FBI field office statement, not in any piece of reporting from any journalist covering this case. The question is this: at what point on the night of January 31st did the person who came to Nancy Guthrie's door at 1:47 in the morning decide they were coming? Not when they arrived, not when they disabled the camera. When they decided. Because deciding and arriving are not the same moment, and the distance between those two moments is where this entire investigation lives. The 19-minute window just gave us one end of that distance. We know what normal looked like at 10:10 p.m. We know it held. We know that Nancy's own body, recorded in real time by the device keeping her alive, showed no awareness of any threat from the moment that garage door closed. Which means the other end of that distance did not happen inside Nancy's home. It happened somewhere else. In a conversation Nancy was not part of. In a plan Nancy did not know existed, before Tomasso's taillights disappeared down her street. Now, there are two ways public commentary has handled that conclusion, and both of them miss the point. The first says the 19-minute window is irrelevant, that Nancy got home safely and reading significance into a quiet Thursday evening is a reach. The second says the window proves coordination, that something was communicated, a signal was sent, a door was left unlocked. Here is why both fail. The first ignores the forensic record entirely. The 19-minute window is not quiet because nothing was happening. It is quiet because the one continuous recording device inside that home was logging a woman at rest, unafraid and completely unaware. That is not nothing. That is the most precise evidence in this case of when the crime had not yet reached Nancy. The second requires activity inside the window to make the window meaningful. The forensic value of those 19 minutes is not what happened inside them. It is what the absence of fear inside them proves about everything that came after. A clean window is not an empty window. A clean window is a document. In 2018, an Ohio man named Ross Compton told investigators he had been asleep when his house caught fire. That the flames startled him awake. That he panicked and threw his belongings through a broken window to escape. His pacemaker told a different story. The device recorded the minutes before that fire began, and what it recorded was not the cardiac profile of a sleeping man. It was the profile of a man who was awake, physically active, and moving through his home with the deliberate pattern of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. The forensic cardiologist who testified did not accuse him of anything. She simply read the data. She showed the jury what a sleeping heart looks like. She showed the jury what his heart looked like. Ross Compton was convicted. Not because a witness placed him at the scene, because his own heart contradicted his own account with a precision no defense attorney could explain away. Now apply that principle here. Nancy's pacemaker recorded pre-sleep relaxation at 10:22 p.m. It recorded an unremarkable settled baseline through the hours that followed, and then at 1:47 in the morning it recorded a sharp, sudden elevation in heart rate. The physiological signature of a body that has just understood it is in danger. And the distance between those two recordings is not just a timeline. It is a prosecution. A forensic cardiologist on the stand walking through Nancy's complete pacemaker record from 10:10 p.m. to 2:28 a.m. The last normal hours, the clean baseline, the precise moment it shattered. A vehicle forensic specialist on the stand walking through the car's internal logs. Every movement, every door, every phone connection from the moment Tomasso left Nancy's driveway forward. A digital forensics analyst on the stand walking through the communication record of every device connected to every party during the hours between dinner and 1:47. 3 experts, 3 data streams. One timeline that runs without interruption from a warm Thursday evening to the early hours of a February morning. That is the architecture of a federal prosecution that asks a jury to do one thing. Decide whether they believe a human account or 3 simultaneous physical records. Juries in this country believe the physical record, and the forensic record does not wait for anyone to decide they are ready to tell the truth. It simply sits there, time-stamped, precise, patient. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She had dinner with her daughter on a Thursday night. She walked into the house she loved. Her heart settled into the rhythm of a woman who expected nothing unusual to happen. And someone on that same Thursday evening had already decided they were coming for her. The 19-minute window does not just tell us what normal looked like. It tells us that normal was already over for the people who were ending it. Nancy is still out there. Her pacemaker is running without clinical oversight somewhere unknown to the people who love her. Her daughter has not had her mother home in over 2 months. If you were in the Catalina foothills area of Tucson on the night of January 31st into the early hours of February 1st, and you saw a vehicle that did not belong, the FBI wants to hear from you. If you have had any contact with anyone connected to this case who said something in the week since February 1st that you have not been able to shake, that information matters. If you work in cardiac forensics, vehicle data recovery, or digital forensics and you have technical knowledge that applies to this investigation, the FBI needs your expertise. The tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. That is 1-800-225-5324. You can submit anonymously at tips.fbi.gov. The Guthrie family's $1 million reward is active. If you have not watched this channel's previous videos on the pacemaker data and the car evidence, both are linked below. Watch them next because all 3 videos together give you the most complete forensic picture of where this investigation stands today. Subscribe to Criminal Engineering. Turn on notifications so you do not miss what is coming. And drop your thoughts in the comments below. Does the 19-minute window change when you think this crime was planned? Because in our next video we are going into the 3 hours between Nancy walking through her garage door and the masked figure arriving at her front door at 1:47 in the morning. 3 hours that have never been fully mapped. 3 hours that contain the planning, the route, the preparation, and the decision that ended Nancy Guthrie's last normal night. That window has a story, and we are going to tell it.